Thanks for checking out the show. I'm Scott Fisher in New York. On this episode of Innovator Insights, we are talking about what happens after you decide to build an innovative school. It's easy to put big words on a brochure. Running a tech-forward campus without the wheels falling off is a different story. My guest is Kapil Mathur, the Executive Director of the Orange County Academy of Sciences and Arts, a tuition-free public charter school network providing hands-on student-centered education. Dr. Mathur was recently named a business visionary by the LA Times. Welcome to the show, and where are you joining us from today?
Thank you so much for the welcome. I'm in Orange County, California. I'm actually in my home office because we're in the middle of a move to expand our organization.
I understand. I see that you're growing, and that's wonderful. So now you have a very interesting background, and it didn't start in education. So do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you went from all the other things you've done in your life to ending up opening a charter school?
Yeah. So I think the common thread across my career has really been a focus on how people learn. So prior to being in education, I was doing consulting work for the U.S. Navy, working on how does their workforce learn to use technology, and how do they innovate in their own fields with the use of technology. So everything from working on standardized coding to how laptops are rolled out in deployed areas. And the thing that really interested me the most was people learn in different ways, and they have different experiences that they bring to the activity of learning something new. And unfortunately, most of our methods of educating people are very standardized.
Sure.
And so they don't take that variability into account, and they don't actually create, they don't allow people to create their own internal framework connecting the various pieces of knowledge that they collect. And so I was really fascinated by really trying to understand, is there a way to personalize learning in such a way that students can master material, and in the process of mastering the material, that they can actually connect it to the things that they already know. So when I was in college, I did a project for the Orange County Department of Education, where we were looking at how do K-12 students learn science, and can we connect science to the real world? Then, after college, I entered my career of doing this work with the military as a civilian contractor. But then, it was a very demanding job. It required a lot of travel, and that was great when I was single.
Yeah.
But after I got married,
not so great.
Priorities change, and you want to not be that person that has a packed suitcase in the trunk of their car, not knowing when you're going to be home next. So I went back to college. I went to UCLA. I got my MBA. And I was fortunate to connect with a group of other MBA students who were all trying to engineer their own career transitions. And I spent 2 years thinking about what are the things that I actually enjoy and what's the value that I can add, and connecting the work that I had done when I was a college student and the work that I had done in the early stages of my career. I really decided that, okay, I think I have value to add in innovating K-12 education. And so I left grad school thinking I'm going to open a school. But then I realized you don't know anything about opening a school. And
it's a minor detail.
Yeah. And so I was fortunate to connect with a group of people who were starting a tutoring company. And I signed on with them. The company is, you may have heard of them. Their name is Mathnasium.
Sure.
And so I was one of the early operators of the Mathnasium system. And I'm fortunate that I was able to help design the program that's used in thousands of mathnasium learning centers around the world today. The core innovation that we had there was we need to look at what do students know and what do they need to know, and design a personalized pathway that allows us to teach what they know or teach them what they need to know based on what they already know. So, for example, a student who's learning multiplication, we want them to know that multiplication is a shorthand way of doing addition. So 3 times 5 is really a short way of writing 5 plus 5 plus 5. So what we need to know is, how does the student do 5 plus 5 plus 5? Are they fluid with their single digit addition, or are they really good at skip counting? And so we designed exercises that connect that foundational skill that they're bringing in order to teach them the multiplication. So I did that for about a decade, operating many learning centers in Orange County. And I had parents who were asking me, gosh, my kid understands math when you teach it to them. Why don't they understand it in school? And it's not because our schools are poor or we don't have good teachers. It's because the system is not structured to treat students as individuals. We have a third grade Common Core standard and a third grade teacher who is required to teach what's in those standards, regardless of what the students actually need. And so there came a point in time where I said, okay, it's time to go back to that original idea of opening a school. But I thought, oh, I'm going to open a private school. Well, you have a lot of challenges with funding and facilities and equity. Are you actually able to serve all students in a private school environment? Fortunately, in California and in many other states, there is the ability for a nonprofit organization to operate their own public school. And so in 2015, I founded Orange County Academy of Sciences and Arts, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and wrote a petition to our local school district to open a charter school, taking the concept of identifying what a student knows and what they need to know, and creating a system whereby we can teach them in a small group format to take the knowledge that they already know and add to it and build that scaffold, build that foundation, so that they are then able to master material, apply that material to things that they care about, and learn new things almost on their own. We launched the first school in 2016, and that is our first elementary school. We just completed our 10th school year, and the results are really astounding. We have probably the most humble, aka the worst facility of any school in the area. Okay, we have a handful of portables that were scheduled to be decommissioned 15 years ago.
Probably used for an expansion construction of a public school system at one point, right? As temporary classrooms.
Correct. So, in working with our local school district, part of the benefit of being a charter school is that the facilities have to be shared with public schools. So the school
Can I interrupt you just for one moment? Maybe you could clarify the distinction between a charter school and a private school, particularly in the state of California. Because I understand there's funding and there's requirements associated with being a charter school that differ from a private school. But for people listening who might not understand that distinction, if you could just briefly talk about that, I'd appreciate it.
So a charter school is a public school. Charter school teachers have to have the same education and credentialing to teach at a traditional public school. As a charter school, we have to follow the state education code. We have to accept all students. We have to be tuition free. And we have to take the same standardized state tests that students at a traditional public school have to complete. In exchange for adhering to these public requirements, the funding for the student follows the student. So the tax money and the state money and the federal money that comes to educate students is divided, at least in California, it's divided based on student attendance. So whatever school that a student attends, the school gets funding for each day of their
The money
attendance.
follows. Right.
So students who attend charter schools, the charter school receives the funding for that student to attend. Similarly, on facilities in California, the California voters passed a proposition called Proposition 39, which basically says the facilities that are available to public school students are also available to charter school students. And so students that enroll at a charter public school, the school district that they live in needs to provide the physical space for that school to exist. So we worked with our local school district, and they provided us with a portion of a campus that another school shares with us, and they provide the amount of space for the students that come from their school district.
Let me ask what's probably going to be very simple questions or seem very simple. What's the motivation for someone like you to start a school? Is it simply a different philosophy and approach? What's the motivation for a parent to send their student to your school versus the same public school, let's say in the same school district, or is that limitation that the students can come from outside of the district? And then lastly, what's the motivation to allow the public school system or the state of California, or any state for that matter, to allow the creation of charter schools? So that's a multiple part questions. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'll answer them in reverse.
Sure.
So why do charter schools exist? Charter schools exist primarily to be a center of innovation. So when you think about a school district, they have multiple campuses, they have large budgets, they have different constituencies, city, teachers union, classified workers union. They have all kinds of different people, of course, parents and students. They have all kinds of groups, large groups of people that they have to make sure that they're involved in the decision-making process and that they have buy-in before they can roll out an initiative. So that makes them a little bit less innovative, not because they don't want to be innovative and not that they aren't innovative, but because it just takes longer. So a charter school, we still have those constituencies and we still have to follow the education code, but we're just a smaller environment and we have a tad bit more flexibility because of that smaller environment. And so we can be more nimble. So if you want to innovate a system, you can't start from large entities. You have to start from small entities. Small entities that can try different things, see what works, and then that can then trickle down into the larger entities. You know, the way that I think about it in my mind is that a school district is like a battleship, okay? It's a whole city. It's got well thought out plans and procedures. They take years and decades to develop and perfect. But if you want to change one of those things, it takes a long time. If the battleship needs to change direction, and instead of going west, turn east. That's a huge operation. Charter school is like a tugboat. We're inflatable. We're in some cases temporary. And there's less people on it, and we can turn and we can try things, and we can see what can work. And so that's why they exist. They initially existed to be a place of innovation. As far as what would motivate somebody to start a charter school, or what would motivate a parent to send their kid to a charter school, I think these are really the people who want something different, who want something innovative, who want to try something new. So it's really, honestly, it's very difficult to be a parent at a charter school. You probably have to drive to take your kid to school further from where like your neighborhood school would be. You probably have to deal with facilities that aren't up to the standard of your neighborhood school.
Right.
You don't have a fully built out system like you would at your neighborhood school. You have pieces and parts. Because it's about innovation, things change a lot. And so it's really the people who want that, who want something different. That's why we started OCASA. That's why I sent my own child to OCASA, because me and my wife, we wanted something different for our child. And there are lots of other people in the community who wanted something different for their children.
Yeah. Now, the equity you spoke about with regards to facilities, does that transfer, or does that include the distribution of technology as well? In other words, if your public school is providing one-to-one devices to their students, are they required to provide you with the resources to do the same, or do you operate completely separately when it comes to technology?
It's actually quite a complicated answer. I believe what the regulations say is that everything related to the infrastructure needs to be shared in, at least in California, what is termed as reasonably equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever is provided to a student at a traditional district public school should be provided to a student at a charter school by the district. I think in reality, that's probably an exception. What OCASA gets from our district is we get the physical space, we get furniture. They did provide us with a set of Chromebooks, a class set, but they're trying their best. They also don't have unlimited funds.
Right.
A lot of those kind of things that are provided at a traditional public school have a variety of funding mechanisms. And so sometimes that's grants that they've written, or donations, or PTA paying for things. Those things that are sourced from alternative funding sources, they don't come to the charter school. But I would say that by and large, what charter schools receive is the physical building.
Right.
And then everything else, while technically it's supposed to be provided, charter schools find other ways to do those kinds of things.
The reason I ask is I spent 30 plus years as a district technology coordinator in New York State. And we were required, if we had any type of private schools or what have you, or charter schools, anything within our borders, we were required, when we were doing a technology initiative, to give them a proportional amount of technology related to the number of students that they were supporting. So if we were putting in, let's say back at the time, smart boards or projectors or things like that, we would have to provide, proportionally the same amount of equipment to that school, especially if it was through a bond, through the state or what have you. It was an absolute requirement. So that's what made me think of that. Now, is the day-to-day classroom activity of your students, well, let me start over. How does it differ from that of a traditional classroom? Is there a heavy technology focus? And if so, how can I put this carefully? Is the technology used in a more efficient way than perhaps in a traditional public school? And what I mean by that is the students use the technology for a project, to do a specific task. It's not just, here's a computer, have fun with it all day, or, something like that. It's, no, this is a tool, just like other tools we probably provide you, and it's to be used for this specific reason. And we're allowing you to use it because we think there's a benefit in you using it, as opposed to just, here's a tool, make it work for the project. It's sort of the other way around, where the project is already planned and the tool is useful for the project.
Yeah. So we are a tech forward organization. Depending on the grade level, we provide either an Apple iPad or a MacBook to students. So lower elementary, there's usually like a small group set of iPads in the classroom. Starting around second and third grade, it goes 1-to-1 with iPads, all the way up to fifth grade. And then in sixth grade, 6th through 12th grade, students receive a MacBook Air. We went away from, the Chromebook world, and it goes to your question. We believe that technology should not be used solely for the consumption of material. It is not a digital textbook. Technology needs to be used for the creation in the education process. So our students with the iPads will do things like video creation. They'll maybe do their own podcasts. They will do a lot of work with creating slide decks and things like that for their presentations. They'll make apps. What we try to avoid is having the students sit there and watch a video or play a game. I think, especially right now, it's a very hot topic, the amount of screen time that kids receive, and kind of the data is very mixed or not supporting how technology is currently being used in schools. We're having in some schools, there are some side effects around behavior and social emotional development. I think that the conversation needs to evolve. What we do is not what I think people think about when they think screen time. I see kids in the shopping cart at Costco, and the mom has the iPhone kind of strapped onto the cart, and they're watching Bluey or something like that.
The digital babysitter.
Correct. That I think does not have a place in a school environment. And so I think that we're seeing kind of a pendulum swing where parents are starting to be vocal and wanting to opt out of the use of technology in their child's school. I think that the conversation, as I said, it needs to evolve. It needs to be, what is the intentionality around how students are using technology? And can we tie that use to actual positive academic and social emotional outcomes? The reality is technology is here to stay. At least in California, I'm sure it's the same in New York. The kids have to take their tests on the computer starting in third grade. And so they need to know how to use it. And we need to, as the educators in partnership with the parents, we need to teach the kids what's the appropriate use and what's the inappropriate use. And there has to be a multi-layer system to make sure that the technology is used appropriately. Especially, I get teachers who come to me and say, can we have screen monitoring software? Can we block these websites? Can we do X, Y, and Z? And we can, and we do those things. Mm-hmm. However, kids are really smart.
Absolutely.
And the minute you throw up a barrier, it's only a few days, if not weeks, before they find a way around the barrier. And so you can't only use a technological solution of like a firewall or something like that to block access. That's one piece of it, but there needs to be another piece of it, which is the community norms and the expectations around the use of technology. It's no different than a pencil. When I was in school, we had very limited use of technology. So we used to use like the number 2 pencil and the bubble paper to take our standardized tests. And there were the kids that would take the pencil and stick it in to the ceiling.
Of course.
Right? But I never did that. That was part of a community norm. Like, that's not okay. You can do it, and there's really no way we can stop you. But as we're rolling out technology, as we're innovating technology, it has to be done with both community building and expectations, coupled with very intentional use, being very clear that this is not just, I'm trying to keep you quiet and I need to work with these other kids. So I'm using this, as you said, as a digital babysitter. So it's going to evolve. And then when you add in, this whole, it's not new anymore, but this whole layer of AI,
right,
and making sure that we're not robbing kids of actually learning those foundational skills and mastering those foundational skills because AI is doing the work for them. There's a whole lot of work in education that has to be done around technology. And it looks today very different than it did 2 years ago. And it's going to look even different 2 years from now.
I agree completely. And honestly, I wasn't clear on your views on the subject, but to be quite frank with you, I've written a couple of articles recently in the similar vein that I feel it's very important that as a community or a village, it be addressed, that you don't want to throw out the device and say bad device. Instead, you want to teach the children to use it properly. I think it's very important that not just the teachers, certainly the teachers, but the school administrators and the parents model best practices that show the students. And we're talking both phones, because phone was the big one first, banning the cell phone in the school. And I'm not against not using cell phones in school. I'm against telling the kids that you can't be trusted to learn how to use the device properly and when and where it should and shouldn't be used. And I think that's very important they be taught that. Just like the same thing with the computer, when and where, for what purpose, because this is a life skill, as you pointed out. They need it for the AI piece. AI is here to stay. Just the technology is here to stay. So I think it's incumbent upon anybody who's a part of this field to do it in a responsible way, to say, yes, we understand the negative aspect of it or the potential negative aspect, but there's also some great things that can come from it. So let's figure out a way to work together collectively to figure out the best approach rather than just banning something entirely. I mean, in your example, they didn't ban pencils and say no longer will you have pencils in school, right? I mean, that would have been the equivalent, So how do you fill out the bubble? You can't. Well, it's the same thing as you're saying. We need the computers for the testing. We need the computers for many good reasons. So let's figure out an approach that demonstrates to the students the responsible way to have these devices at their disposal. So now, because you're so heavy into tech, or because your curriculum is heavily focused on STEAM and so forth, do you have a large tech support staff? Or unfortunately, because of your size, are you limited to the number of staff members being quite small for supporting the technology?
At the size we are now, we're kind of post-IT. So my dad used to tell me a story. So my dad was an engineer. And when he started working, engineers would have drafting tables and they would write, and they would have like stencils for drawings and things like that. And then there was an entire department that was the typing pool. So these are people who knew how to use a typewriter. And so when documents needed to be created, the engineer would write it in longhand. And then there was a typing pool that would take that longhand and type up the work. IT is, I believe, in education is following a similar pattern where there used to be the need for specialized people who focused on the use of technology or the use of IT in the education environment. It's now at the point where, just like with the typewriter, now every person who's an engineer needs to know how to use a computer. We're now getting to the point and use and configure and set up and evaluate how to use. We're now getting to that point in education where IT is no longer a separate function, but it is part of every function's job.
Right.
So we are very small. We do not have a single dedicated IT person on staff. We do, for sort of our base level configuration, network and phones and account creation, password resets and things like that, we outsource that to a partner who is a managed service provider who focuses on schools. But then beyond that, every person in the organization has their own piece of maintaining the infrastructure of the school.
But when it comes to like data security and privacy, you mentioned about, the students are very quick to learn and circumvent things. I'm sure if you're using Google Docs and you have people collaborating within your organization, kids are kids and they can do things that perhaps they shouldn't be doing. They're using it as opposed to a Google chat or something like that, and they're sending information back and forth. So you have people or tools in place to make sure that either if they're doing that, it's stopped or it's monitored, or personal information isn't being shared, whether it be by students or by staff members. I'm sure you have the most basic security measures in place that any other school would have to have, correct?
Yeah, so those are kind of the base level things that our managed service provider
Right.
brings to the table. So, that's the use of an MDM, that's the use of GoGuardian filtering, that's a hardware layer. We used to use the Cisco Meraki platform. We've recently transitioned our network to the Unify platform. Different applications that we use have their own alert and monitoring processes.
Right.
So if a student is writing something that requires some kind of intervention, the teacher or the principal gets alerted. I think that's going to be evolving. You talk about a Google Doc in place of chat. The kids are so innovative. I have some kids that use Google Calendar in place of a chat because they know that like the teacher can see all of everything that's in their Google Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And they can see the calendar, but the teacher's not like looking through a student's calendar. So they create a calendar event, and then in the notes they chat back and forth to each other. It's
just like back in the day, passing paper in the class. I mean, it's a classroom management issue to some extent, but yeah, no matter, it's cat and mouse. Is always going to be playing catch up for sure. The kids are smart.
And to some extent, it creates, as you said, classroom management issues. But to some extent, like that's really innovative. They're problem solving. They're trying to do what they want to do in a way that they can do it. And so I get frustrated, but I also smile at the same time when I see, how the kids do things.
Just a quick story. In another district, this wasn't in my district, many years ago, the students were given laptops. They were one of the first districts to get laptops, and they were told they couldn't use them for anything but school. And one of the kids was smart enough that he realized that the hard drives they popped out. They literally slid out. So he went out and bought himself a hard drive. And when he would go home with the device at night, he would plug his own hard drive in and use it for wherever he wanted, take it out, put the school's laptop hard drive back in. And when the school found out, they were kind of struck like you were. Like on one sense, you want to tell the kid, bad student. But on the other side, you want to go, that's very innovative. And that's a very creative problem-solving solution that you came up with here. So it's very difficult. I want to shift to AI a little bit. Of course, AI is the hot topic, and I want to understand why, or how I should say, a lot of schools panicked when ChatGPT, came on the scene and everybody, we have to ban this. Oh my goodness. You took a different approach or a different path. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your school handled it or is handling it now, and the use of AI in general, not just necessarily specifically ChatGPT?
So as you said earlier, AI is here. It's not going away. It's probably going to look different in the future and even in the near future. For me as an administrator, just trying to keep up between, the latest thing that Gemini rolled out, the latest thing that Anthropic rolled out, it feels like every day it's kind of a different world. I think in a school environment, we have to make a very clear distinction between what do we mean when we say AI. I think that The general public, when you say AI, they think chatbots. And there were several people very early on that came out with chatbots for students. And
Some very large companies, I might add, but go ahead.
yes, I sat in one of the very first demos that Sal Khan did for Conmingo. And he showed this really cool thing where I think it was he told Conmingo that you're Tom Sawyer, and the student is now interacting with the chatbot as if chatbot was that character, as a demonstration of how AI could be used in an ELA lesson. I think the use case is not there, and we're not there yet with the tech to really have students use chatbots. And so we don't allow students to use chatbots, but they do use AI. And the student use of AI is very limited. It's very specific. It's tested by the teachers ahead of time as to how is it going to work. It's done in a limited pilot to see if it's actually driving outcomes for students. But it's the actual student direct use of AI, at least at my school, is extremely limited. And it's usually older kids. Where I think the opportunity today lies for AI is to ease teacher burden and to improve school operations. Data privacy and security is a huge concern, but I do see that those kinds of things will start to, there will be reasonable solutions that will start to enable the use of AI to analyze student data and provide better information to teachers about the progress of their students and what their students know. If you think back to, how we started this conversation, where I told you about we need to understand what does the student know and what do they need to know, and what is the path to connect what they need to know to what they already know. There is a huge opportunity for AI to do that work. Right now, our teachers are doing that manually, individually, student by student. It works, but the scalability without the use of AI is questionable. Now, we don't currently put our student data into Claude or into ChatGPT because that privacy piece hasn't been solved yet. But where our organization is marching toward is what we call play, PLAI, personalized learning through the use of artificial intelligence. And so the play model that we are on the path to getting towards starts with personalized assessments. So taking what the system already knows about a student and asking them only the number of questions on the topics that we have ambiguity about. So we don't have to spend, 2-3 hours doing the NWEA map test 2 or 3 times a year. We can do a 20-minute check-in, take that data and create a personalized learning plan for each student, help the teacher identify how to develop small groups of students who have similar personalized learning plans. And then the third piece is take the actual curricular materials and use the data that we know on the student to tailor those materials to target specifically how they learn and what they need to know. So, for example, we had a teacher who wanted their students to read a passage about the Hubble Space Telescope. And this teacher had students in her class with Lexile scores from 400 to 1200.
Huge gap. Huge, right.
How do you select that one passage that is appropriate for that range of students? You don't. What you do instead, and what we did as a test, is we gave the passage to ChatGPT and we said, I want 5 versions of this
At different levels.
And here are the Lexile score ranges for each version.
Right.
And here is the content that I want to make sure is in each of the passages. So I don't remember what we told it, but it would be things like, why was it named Hubble? When was it launched? And what do we hope to learn from?
But it's presented in a manner that's easily digestible, if you will, by each of the students at their own level.
It has the sentence structure and the vocabulary to match their Lexile score.
Right.
Okay. So that way, the teacher can break up the class into 5 small groups. Each group can read the passage that is in an appropriate Lexile score for them, so that the reading doesn't get in the way of learning the science. But because all of the passages contained the same content, the teacher was then able to bring all the small groups back together and have a full class-based discussion on the content.
Yeah, that's a great example of a positive way to use AI in the classroom and to benefit everybody. It saves the teaching staff time. It gives the students, exactly what they need to get from the material. And that's a great example. You've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it greatly. But I don't want to take up too much more of it. So let me just. There's so much more I'd love to ask you questions about. But let me just finish up with this. If there's people out there listening, watching, who feel similar to the way you do about the approach to learning needing to change and so forth, how do you suggest they get started? Like, what, just at the most basic level, what would be the first step that you would suggest to them?
I think the first step is get involved in your local schools. I think that across any kind of school, whether it's a traditional district operated public school, a charter school, a private school, all schools need people, and all schools need the community to help them and bring their expertise. We are so fortunate at OCASA. We have such an amazing group of parents who partner with our incredible team of educators to do great work for the kids and with the kids. So I think getting involved is the very first most important thing. There is so much that has been politicized about education. I think that if you only rely on an understanding of what's happening in schools by watching or listening to what other people say about it, that may or may not actually be relevant to your own community schools, because schools are very, very different.
Yeah.
So I think getting involved is important, and asking questions. A lot of what happens in education is inertia. We've always done it this way, so we're going to continue to do it this way. Asking questions in a constructive, positive way would be the second thing to do.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. The parent involvement is critical. I think there's nothing more important than that, having the parents play a direct part in it. You've touched upon a number of things. I recently recorded an episode that hasn't been released yet with Will Richardson, and there's a lot of commonalities across what you're talking about and what he was talking about on that episode. So I am seeing a shift, I think, in the right direction, away from tech as the savior to let's be more realistic about how we use tech and what we use it for, and how differently to approach the status quo, like you said, just because we've always done it this way, kind of thing. That mentality needs to, I think, be changed, certainly, or at least reevaluated, to say the least. But anyway, I greatly appreciate your time today. Thank you again so much. And to everyone who's listening or watching, please be sure to check out innovatorinsights.io for the links and show notes. You can drop us a review on Apple or Spotify. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. And thank you again for your time today. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much. It was really great to chat with you, and appreciate the conversation.
Pleasure was all mine.